They told me to take down my little orange sign said it was untidy and besides, a homeowner shouldn't be planting notices without HOA permission. I stuck that sign in the ground with my own hands. And when that Lexus slid nose first into the yard one night and vanished into an angry hole, that sign became the only thing anybody remembered. A single moment makes you either the idiot or the prophet, depending on who gets to tell the story. My name is Sam Carter. I'm 62, retired civil engineer, and I moved to Willow Bend for the trees and the quiet cul-de-sac, not for committee meetings or aesthetic debates. At first it was small, a neighbor's gutter pushing water toward my side yard, rain that left a new crack in the pavement. I walked the lot line, watched the soil, and worried old habits die slow. I'd spent a life finding problems nobody wanted to learn the names of. You get used to seeing where things fail. Marla Hayes ran the HOA with tidy conviction. She liked order rules, newsletters, monthly votes. To her, a spotless front yard was the public face of community pride. To me, that face was sometimes cosmetic. When I told her about the pooling water and the lawn dipping, she smiled, made it a form, and said, "We can handle this. Please file a formal request." "This is a safety issue," I said. She turned it into a complaint and filed it between bake sale flyers and welcome committee notes. Someone pulled the sign out at dawn. I put it back. They pulled it again. I started taking photos, time-stamping them, noting rainfall amounts, engineer instincts, paperwork that comforts and isolates you. I talked to neighbors quietly. Lisa Moreno said she'd felt the foundation settle under her laundry room. Aaron Blake admitted he'd found a void near the curb that made his dog avoid the spot. Little things that together spelled out something ugly. The emails began formal, clipped. Unauthorized signage, community standards. Marla enforced bylaws with the same calm she used to pick paint colors, and suddenly I felt like a defendant. She fined me and scheduled a hearing where polite fluorescence illuminated polite faces and the power dynamics of a small-town administration. I sent a packet to the county because Willow Bend might prefer a neat newsletter to an engineer's worry, but county engineers don't sign off on neatness. A man in khaki came with a clipboard and a serious truck. He scheduled a survey, which felt like a tiny victory. For 2 weeks, the neighborhood pretended normalcy. For 2 weeks, the ground continued its slow work. Victor Hayes drove home late after a long day. The night had been a slow, steady rain. He turned into the cul-de-sac and onto the patch I'd been watching. I was on my porch and saw the whole thing. The asphalt bowed, the headlights pitched, and then that awful, hydraulic sound of earth giving way. The Lexus sank as if someone had pulled a rug from under it. Victor climbed out, soaked, furious, and he looked for someone to blame. He looked at me. "What did you do?" he asked. I remember saying, "Quiet." I placed a sign. Later, Marla called it sabotage. In a neighborhood email, the word dropped like a grenade. Emergency meetings were convened, petitions circulated. Neighbors who had been friendly about fence heights suddenly declared allegiances. Then the county report arrived and changed the grammar of the argument. Hidden storm drains, an unmapped culvert, years of slow erosion, things that do not consider bylaws. The report used my photographs, match dates, and noted rain totals. It had stamps and language and an authority HOA memos lacked. Evidence became something other than opinion. Marla called a town hall. The community center was full, people in jackets, holding coffee as if bracing for a verdict. Marla opened with civility, but then tried to recenter blame on me. "We can't let fear spread," she said. She tried to make my sign the story. I stood and slid my packet across the table, dated photos, the county memo, Aaron's note, Lisa's text. I said, "Simple. This isn't about a sign. This is about failing infrastructure." What followed felt cinematic. People who'd been polite suddenly spoke with detail and anger. Aaron, usually quiet, described the void he'd found and the sound the soil made when you tapped it. Lisa showed a picture of a cracked garage slab. Victor, embarrassed and angry, attempted to reclaim control by shouting that someone had sabotaged his driveway. Marla answered with posture and a tight smile, and at one point she said, "This is about community cohesion," which sounded like someone trying to stitch a torn garment with a catalog. The vote that night was procedural but decisive. We didn't stage a spectacle. We ran through committees, bids, and authorizations. The board voted to bring in remediation teams and to review leadership. When a leader's posture becomes liability, Posture can't hold. Marla resigned that night. People who once cheered fines learned engineering vocabulary and permit processes. Cleanup was noisy and honest. Backhoes peeled back the yard like an unspooling truth. A collapsed culvert stared up like the missing piece of a bad puzzle. Victor's car became a dented memory. Contractors measured, priced, and poured concrete. The neighborhood shifted from gossip to paperwork. For me, the aftermath was quieter and complicated. I lost the anonymity of a man who keeps to himself. Some neighbors nodded. Some still circled my property like curious strangers. There were people who preferred a simpler tailbad man with a sign, but most started asking better questions. We set up a small fund and changed bylaws to require infrastructure checks after major storms. Those were small victories. There was a media Ripley local TV van and a headline or two in. Suddenly anonymous opinions grew louder. The clip of me on camera asking why I had been labeled a troublemaker made some folks double down on old stories. Others, emboldened, shared late fees and maintenance requests they'd kept quiet. The social pressure was as loud as the backhoe. I wrestled with pride and doubt. Did I escalate? Could I have handled it differently? I replay conversations and wonder if my persistence read as arrogance. There's a fine line between being persistent and being a pain. Part of me wanted to be right. Part of me wanted my neighborhood to be safe. Maybe those desires aren't separate. The older you get, the more you realize civic action can feel like a tax you pay and sleepless nights. The human truth is messy. Marla wasn't malicious. She believed neat fronts meant safety and pride. Victor didn't mean to drive into a sinkhole. He was late and human. Their motives were ordinary, which made the fallout painfully ordinary too, an accumulation of small choices and misaligned incentives. Now, think bigger with me for a second. This wasn't just a cul-de-sac argument. It's a little lens on how communities choose to govern themselves. HOAs promise order and stable values, but sometimes the mechanisms designed to protect appearance create blind spots. When we prioritize how things look, do we outsource our common sense to committees and glossy newsletters? Who gets to decide what matters? The person with the loudest voice in a meeting or the one who quietly documents a problem until someone listens? If you grew up in HOA country or you've ever found yourself in a neighborhood fight about a tree, a fence, or a sign, you know how fast civility can thin into tribal lines. So here's a challenge. If you think appearances are less important than infrastructure, say so in the comments and tell a specific example. If you think the HOA model works and we need rules to hold things together, tell us why and give an example where it helped. Argue for your CDB precise, be civil, and use instances, not slogans. Finally, if this story made you think about your own street, take a minute this week to walk your lot line, chat with a neighbor, and look where water runs. Take photos, note dates, and keep them in a folder. Sometimes prevention starts with a habit. Subscribe if you want more stories from small places that expose big questions about justice, responsibility, and how ordinary choices change communities. Share this video and tell us where you stand, right, wrong, or somewhere complicated in between. I want to hear your side.